to the Experienced Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, we continue our ongoing spotlight on learning through the case method here at the Darden School of Business, with a conversation with three members of our Full-Time MBA Class of 2023, Wade Clement, Lucy King, and Edreana Vaz. In this conversation, I talk with Wade, Lucy, and Edreana about their decision to pursue an MBA, what led them to Darden, how they prepare for class, what it's like participating in a case discussion, and so much more. If you are interested in learning more about the academic experience here at the Darden School, this conversation is highly recommended. So without further ado, here's my interview, Wade Clement, Lucy King, and Edreana Vaz. Wade, Lucy, Edreana, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks, Brad.
It's great to have you. How are you doing? This is your last quarter. How does that feel?
I mean, for me, it's definitely bittersweet. I've had a fantastic experience here so far, and hard to believe that in 6 weeks or about that, we'll be on the, graduating and moving on to our next chapter.
Yeah, I will echo that sentiment, Wade. It is wild to think that the 2 years are almost up. Time has definitely flown, and it's been an incredible experience so far.
I couldn't disagree, because right now in my room, I have three of the closest friends I've made here at Darden. And all we just talk about how we're going to spend the next 6 weeks before we all go at different directions. And it's so hard to believe it's getting over.
I will admit that as I've talked with second years at this particular moment in their time here at Darden, there's sometimes a little bit of a bucket list, these things that I have to do before I graduate. Lucy, do you have a list like that? Are there things that you want to make sure you do before graduation?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think for me, my list per se really revolves around spending some quality time, both with the people and the friends that I've already really developed relationships with, and then also making sure that I have that chance to connect with anyone that I, haven't had the chance to yet so far. So I think certainly want to, spend some time making the most of what Charlottesville has to offer with all of the restaurants and the outdoor activities. But I think a lot of that's going to revolve around doing that with my Darden community.
How about you, Edreana?
Yeah, it's so funny you asked that, because just yesterday I got an email from one of my close friends where we started this Excel sheet of everything that we need to be doing now that we're running out of time. And all of it is a group of small group dinners, lunches, hikes you want to complete here at Charlottesville, because it's so beautiful. Every time I fly over, I'm like, gosh, I'm going to miss this place. So yeah, I resonate a lot with what Lucy said. And it's also getting to give back in so many ways now that we have our rising, our first years, rising second years, and the incoming students. We have the Darden Days coming up. So it's reliving all of these by also giving back.
I have to think that's a very special moment to go to Darden Days as a second year student, remembering back when you were, an incoming student. Of course, you got the first year students. It's a great time as you have these three classes all coming together. So Wade, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I echo the same sentiment. I think for me, it's more about how to prioritize this remaining time. I've been on a quest since I've gotten here to find the best restaurant and the best vineyard in Charlottesville, and I can't call an end to that until the last day I'm here. So, I'll be on a quest to continue looking into that. And one thing that's on my bucket list is actually carrying the Darden Cup trophy, and we have 2 more events in that. Sorry to say, Lucy and Edreana, but Section C is going to bring home the victory this year. So that's definitely on my bucket list, and, really cementing those ties with our phenomenal faculty and friends here before we go.
Wade, I understand it's very close. Darden Cup this year, a few of the sections have reasonable shots at it. That's what's been reported, at least here on the podcast.
Yeah, it's very close right now. I'm very proud to say, as a Section C representative in my first year, but staunch supporter, that we're currently inch forward in the lead. We have 2 more events left of racket sports and kickball before the end of the tournament. But it's been a extremely competitive year, and a lot of fun has already been had. So hopefully we can round it off strong.
Yeah, we had Ernest Petway on the podcast talking about Darden Cup. And racket sports, I believe, includes tennis and pickleball this year. So something for everybody. Pickleball, fastest growing sport in America, I think, at this point. So glad to hear that's made its way into the Darden Cup. So, well, let's talk a little bit more about you. So this is going to be a conversation about the learning experience here at Darden. We're going to talk a lot about the case method and what it's like to be a student preparing for class, going to class here at Darden. But before we get there, I want to learn just a little bit more about the folks who are in this conversation. So Wade, can I come to you first? Tell us a little bit more about you and your background.
Sure. So I'm from California originally. I went to undergrad at Duke University, and then spent kind of the last 5 years working as a program director of a nonprofit organization in LA, providing after-school intervention programs to lower-income middle school and high school students. In that role, I had a lot of the day-to-day operations management, a lot of the fundraising capabilities, and had the fortune to work with incredible teams of our employees, as well as building community ties with professional sports teams, local businesses, and really trying to provide education access for students. For me, the last 2 years has been a huge opportunity for me as I've looked to deepen my experience into the business world and the for-profit world. And I hope to really cement ties between the public and private sectors going forward. And Darden has really prepared me to take that next step.
And how did you decide that you wanted to pursue an MBA?
So one of the things that I recognized in my role was a little bit of a disconnect between the public and private sector. And I saw a huge opportunity for corporations especially, but private funds as well, to really make a dent in social impact, and to kind of strengthen the ties between for-profit and nonprofit organizations. And for me, as somebody who came from the nonprofit side, I was busy trying to raise funds, make emotional cases for investment and things of that nature. And I realized for myself that there was this whole other world that I really didn't have a full grasp of. And as someone who's a lifelong learner and somebody who wants to be impactful at scale, the MBA really was an opportunity to position myself for that next step. And was able to very, very fortunately, arrive at Darden and get this general management skill set and an incredible network that I think really allows me to make my way forward from here.
All right, Lucy, how about you? Tell us more about you and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up just outside of Boston in Massachusetts. I actually came down to Virginia for my undergrad degree. I studied marketing at the College of William and Mary. In the years between undergrad and Darden, I worked for a number of different business-to-business marketing, or I worked in business-to-business marketing for a number of different firms, starting off at a regional solar energy provider, then doing a short stint at a national architecture firm, and then doing the last about 5 years at a global software company operating in the commercial maritime shipping space. In that last role, I was actually able to lead the marketing team for my 3 years prior to Darden, which was an incredible experience of, growing a team, managing a team, and really pursuing some very exciting marketing initiatives. When it came time to look at different business schools, though, that decision for me was really spurred by the desire to expand my impact beyond just the marketing function. I love the creativity and the strategy one can pursue with marketing, but was really excited about having a broader business impact. So I figured it was time to apply to business school. I found Darden and really fell in love with the program here. Actually, after I got into Darden, I was exploring various career paths, and I found the world of management consulting, which I felt really aligned with my personal interests and goals. And so this past summer, I spent my internship at BCG in their Boston office, and I'm thrilled to be returning full-time after Darden. Similar to Wade, actually, I'm really hopeful that I can focus at least some of my energy in the social impact space through consulting, really helping businesses understand where that private sector power can really have that positive social impact, interacting with all the various stakeholders that are critical for business. So, I understand I will be doing many different things as a consultant. That's part of the attraction for me, is learning all the different business skill sets that I can, and really developing my skills. But hopefully, long term, we'll be able to help private sector businesses optimize their operations both to help their bottom line and help business and society together.
Thank you, Lucy. All right, Adriana, same question for you. Tell us more about you.
Yeah, just listening to all of the experiences just takes me back firstly to the first day of class where we were discussing of how diverse backgrounds we all come from. But as I look back on myself, well, firstly, like I'm from India, so for me it was a whole new experience in trying to come here. As I look back at my experience pre-MBA, I am a chartered accountant by profession, which is like a CPA equivalent. You're in the United States, so my experiences professionally or like in terms of work were always narrowed to financial consulting, be it in terms of mergers and acquisitions consulting or like audit consulting, so on and so forth. And I tried throughout my career to like learn different business skill sets by pivoting my roles from time to time from big firms to like smaller firms until I finally set up my own consulting firm right before Darden. And it's so interesting that despite all these different roles, I was like, yes, I've finally, been able to grasp the breadth of business knowledge. And now I'm having a consulting firm. I still stumbled upon clients where I was like, I did not know how to take this decision because business is so multifaceted and integrated at the same time that I need to like learn more about this. And I think that was not just helpful for me to like contribute more to my clients, but also develop those skill sets for myself, especially when I was dealing with like small businesses, right? They were like the untapped market back in India who were not getting the kind of consulting that we expect from larger firms. So it was interesting to recognize that gap and be like, what am I going to do about it right now?
Great. Well, Lucy, I wonder what brought you to Darden? How'd you decide Darden was the place you wanted to be?
So many different factors, Brett, that all really stack up. But I think the number one factor for me was the community and the people. And I say that not only regarding, my fellow students, but also all of the interactions that I had with faculty members, with staff members, the admissions team throughout my entire, not recruiting, but Darden admissions experience. I was really just struck by the willingness of members of the Darden community to reach out, to answer the question, to have the conversation, regardless of it was a big structural question or a tiny little logistical, like, how does this work here, right? That warmth in that community really stood out to me through the entire admissions process. And ultimately, when I was looking at what MBA program I wanted to attend, obviously I wanted to attend a top program, a great place where I could learn the skills and kind of get that jumping pad that I needed to get to the next phase of my career. Darden obviously fits that bill, but I was also really looking to do so in a place that did prioritize community and people and relationships over, just competition. And so I really think that Darden absolutely exemplified that for me throughout that process. And so that was a big deciding factor. I will say that the second factor that really differentiated Darden was the case method. And just being able to explore the topics that we learn in business school through, putting yourself in the shoes of a case protagonist was absolutely something that appealed to me and has been one of my favorite parts of my Darden experience as well.
All right. Begins to open the door to the purpose of our conversation. I appreciate it. Sophisticated podcast guest. Adriana, how about you? How'd you end up at Darden?
Yeah, so as I decided that now I need an MBA, I started to like jot down what really matters to me. And 4 factors were like very blatantly up in my face in terms of I really need this if I got to make that career move or I need to get that skill set. And just to like quickly jot it down would be definitely like the people. You need to be the right set of people because they are at the end your thought partners. The second was I needed to be in a place that was not a city again, because I come from a place that's crowded with people and has so many things going on that you don't really get to have intimate connections with the people you are interacting with. So I wanted to be in a small space, but at the same time, a place that has things to do, and Charlotte just perfectly came and fit that bucket. I was also looking for a program that helps me learn things from a diverse perspective and not just very theoretical in nature, which, as Lucy mentioned, like the case method was the perfect example of how you learn in a place like this. And finally, it was entrepreneurship, because that runs deep in my career experiences. So I needed a place wherein not necessarily full time, but I would have that option to like work on those set of connection skills and experiences in my entire MBA program.
Excellent. All right, Wade, what led you to Darden?
Kind of a blend of both, Lucy and Edreana here. For me, recognizing my background and kind of looking forward to the type of leader I wanted to become, I knew I wanted the top academic experience that I could possibly find. And that was a combination both of faculty and students. Darden is unparalleled in the quality of faculty members, as well as the type of interactions that we get to have with them here on grounds and off grounds. So that was a huge aspect for me. And then in addition, the diverse perspectives that come into the classroom, I think is unrivaled. Having students from almost all countries in the world, every industry background, for me, I knew would only enhance my perspective as I learned both with and from them. And then finally, I had always prided myself on, or I had always wanted to be at institutions where it really became sort of a part of their identity and they felt an affinity towards, and loyalty towards that experience. And so for me, I looked at the alumni network as well, and I saw how closely the alumni are tied to Darden and what sort of support that they provide current students, prospective students, and just feeling the generosity from, again, what Lucy was talking about, every person I came into contact with at Darden extended a hand in a way that, I felt that I was already supported before even walking into the door. So those are kind of probably the main reasons that I look towards Darden.
I love the commonality across your respective answers. It all comes back to people and relationships and the sense of community and just the environment here at Darden. And so, Edreana, so you come to Darden as a first-year student. You're navigating graduate business school, a lot going on in that first year. What was the adjustment like for you? You're here in Charlottesville learning. Tell us more about that.
I'll start with a funny one first because the rest is going to be really tense. I think the funny one was just realizing how apartments are in the United States, and that's easier said than done for me because for me, like the sense of security is to have like gated apartments with a labor employed for security, and here I'm like, what is happening? There is no one guarding my door. Am I supposed to be up at night? So that's like the funny instance. But the reason I quote that even till date is it's these small things that you feel concerned about and awkward and embarrassed to talk to because it is an adjustment for you, but it's the community that is so understanding of the idea that, like it may be petty for us, but like we know where you're coming from just because you're not used to it. And I think that the adjustment when I look at it is not about the discomfort I had, but about the fact that I can literally tell what I feel. And it's a safe space for people to like understand my point of view and tell me how should I handle it. So that's an adjustment of like being proud of that vulnerability is something I still owe it to my community out here. And the second is more so from, I have like, being a founder really tests you in many ways, but I feel I've been so much more tested here at Darden in juggling academic, recruiting, and social life that now I'm like, I can be prepared for the toughest job out there just because of how we've navigated this. So that was an adjustment purely in terms of learning where to draw boundaries and how to prioritize things at the cost of what matters to you when was a skill set I believe came in a very, very subtle yet important way.
Yeah, it's not something that you necessarily read about on the website, but you realize very quickly that it is a fundamental part of the experience, this prioritization, what's most important. Now there's too much work for you to do it all by yourself. You have to ask for help. You have to lean on other people. I mean, there's so many things that you learn about yourself and future skills that you're going to draw upon later in life as you go forward. But you may not fully realize that that's part of the bargain as you get started here at Darden. How about you, Wade? What were the adjustments for you as you started here at Darden, first year student?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely build off of that. Coming to Darden was like a fire hose of new information for me, both in terms of kind of the new academic work that we were doing, as well as the concepts I was learning, and the volume was turned up, to 10. But fortunately, because of some of those support structures, our learning team members, our classmates, our faculty, that was something that became manageable for me. But really, what was even more so, it's a fire hose, but it's all good things. For me, it was like, how can I figure out how to spend my time and do, when I first got here is how can I do as many of these things as possible? There's so many things that I want to get engaged with and I want to work on. And so trying to adjust in my first year to say, where can I focus more of my efforts? How can I be effective and efficient with my time? And just what you're talking about, how can I prioritize the areas that I really want to make an impact in? That was some of the biggest learning and adjustment that came for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I want to come back to something you said, but I want to give Lucy a chance to get in here first. Lucy, tell us about your adjustment to life at Darden.
Yeah, I mean, I will just echo what my colleagues have said about prioritization. Absolutely a core life skill that I feel like I've gotten a lot better at Darden out of necessity. I think the other, additional thing that I remember from my first quarter at Darden was, you're sitting in class with, 60 to 70 other students in your core section. And you're talking about things that you might have background about. For me, my marketing class was a safe space, but then you're also talking about things that, you might have no concept of. And so for me, I remember that there was a personal mental adjustment around, that maybe on day one, it was, wow, I have no idea about accounting. I have no concept. How am I ever going to contribute to this class? And then over the course of those first few weeks, realizing, oh, wait, I can do this. I can participate. I've got these great peers who are willing to walk me through it. I've got these great professors who are willing to kind of talk me through all of the resources available. And then finding that within myself to not only, raise my hand and volunteer and answer, but also, proactively contribute and drive the conversation as well. So that's definitely something I remember from adjusting to Darden.
Yeah, that's certainly something that comes up here on the podcast where people realize you're going to be asked to speak about things that you have no prior experience with. You may not even be sure about what you're saying, but nevertheless, you're asked to participate. And I mean, there's a lot of growth that comes with that. It may feel a little nerve-wracking at times, but it's all part of the process. So Wade, I wanted to come back to something you said, and it may be on some of our listeners' minds as they listen to this conversation. Darden is a school that leads with the academic experience, and it's known for being challenging. And sometimes people read that and they think, "Gosh, that sounds like a lot of work." What do you say to prospective students when they ask you about the academic experience here?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. It's absolutely one of the priorities here, especially in the first year. Core, it takes up a lot of your time. You're going to be meeting with your learning teams after class. But I would say, for myself at least, that was the reason. The intensity and kind of the academic component was one of the main reasons and drivers for me to attend Darden. I knew that there was so much that I didn't know. I knew that there was so much that I wanted to learn. And I felt ultimately like this was one of the best places that I could do that. And, for me, the academic experience, you get out what you put in, and really being able to dedicate the time to go through your cases and be prepared for class. It might make you better equipped to answer the question, especially in areas that you're less familiar with. But one of the things that I think would kind of tail end on what Lucy was just talking about is there's many ways to contribute in the class besides knowing the right answer. So for me, one of the best ways that I could contribute was asking the question, asking one of my classmates to maybe break down a concept that they threw away in passing, but was new to me. And by doing that, I think you can really enhance each other's learning, while you're in the class itself. And so, what some of the things I would say to prospective students are, there are so many resources and support systems for you while you're here. You're not having to handle all of this new information alone, and you're not the only person to where an operations concept might be new to you, or the accounting format might be new. We're all kind of going through this together at the same time, and there are plenty of people who are willing to lend a hand when you need or want the support.
Excellent. All right, Lucy, what do you say to folks who might ask you this question about? I heard Darden, there's a fair amount of academic work involved with the experience there. What about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when people ask me that question, I always reflect on what an incredible opportunity we have here to really take 2 years and dive into all of these various topics, all of these big concepts, all these big problems, and just talk about it, right? And so, yes, the Darden academic experience is robust. It is demanding. It really pushes you out of your comfort zone in certain areas. But the number one thing that I love about it is that it's okay to use that time and explore it and pursue the understanding. And it's okay if you're not right about the answer the first time you approach the concept, right? I find so much value in the Darden case classroom. Not only, getting the chance to explore these concepts that might be new, but also hear the perspectives of all of the other people in the classroom who might be thinking about it in a different way based on their, prior work experience or, the geography that they come from or the way that their personality, shapes the way they think about different problems. And so, I think the important thing to keep in mind is that yes, we're absolutely here to learn, and that is amazing. But also, reflecting on the purpose of that learning is to grow and develop new skills and maybe think about things in a slightly different way. And so that's one of the biggest values that I have, and I think that when you maybe reframe class and the academic load in that way, it's just an investment in that personal growth, and it's a great way to spend your time and expand your horizons.
Adriana, what would you want to add on this topic?
Yeah, I think I'll keep it short, and I'll probably put it in such a way that despite it being like a fire hose, there's so much for you to do, but there's also so much control that's given to you and how you want to drive your learning experience. Like all of us go to class prepared at a certain level, and we can choose what that level is going to be like. We can choose days where we are like, I want to be a recipient of knowledge, and I'm going to listen from the 65 beautiful minds that are in my class who come from such diverse backgrounds that have an opinion on this topic, versus I'm going to have an opinion because I have a prior background and I want to share it and learn from others as to how they are seeing it in a different light. And that puts you in such a position of control on how are you driving your learning to the goals that you came to school with. And it's eventually going to be a beautiful appreciation of learning how to think versus learning a learning material. And I think that just is that's the last thing I ended when I talked to a prospective student on how do you handle a academic experience like Darden, which is known to be intense and heavy.
Yeah, I appreciate that point about the goal here is to teach you how to think rather than just regurgitate information. Talk with a number of the faculty for an ongoing conversation series we have called Office Hours. And that is one of the things that comes through in those conversations. They say, the classes are equally exciting to us because you just never know what people are going to bring up. And we're here to help students develop judgment and be able to make difficult decisions with incomplete information, to practice these things that they're going to have to do out in the real world, but here in an academic setting. That's what it's about. And so that's such a good point about thought being the goal and teaching you how to think through these things. So let's transition to talk a little bit about the case method, the learning experience here at Darden. So Lucy, how do you explain the case method to people who don't know a lot about it? Maybe they've heard about it, a little bit nervous maybe to ask exactly what it is, but what is the case method? How do you explain it?
Yeah, what a great place to start. So in my mind, the case method is a way of approaching learning by putting yourself in the shoes of a business leader. And this can be someone sitting in any function in any organization who's facing a situation or a challenge or an opportunity and is at kind of a juncture, right? And in a case classroom, each student is given the case reading ahead of time. So everyone has, gotten some of the background, cases, set up the problem, set up the conversation, and they also provide some background information about, the history of the company, maybe the history of the case protagonist. And then the beauty of a case classroom is that everyone comes with some of that common foundation, and there's no answer that's given to you beforehand. So you come into class, and your task in a case classroom is to uncover the different options available for action, and then perhaps evaluate what the best course of action might be given the different goals or restrictions that the case protagonist is facing. So truly is about learning how to approach some of these challenging business problems that, as future business leaders, we're all, going to face at some point in our careers, putting yourself in the shoes of that decision maker, and understanding what information you even need, what's even relevant, how you might start your answer and your approach to that problem, what resources you might need to pull in, what additional information, and really going through the process of solving the problem. And of course, in a classroom, you get to do that with 60 of your closest friends, led by some of the brightest professors available in a business scenario. So it's an incredibly engaging and dynamic conversation, and it's one of my favorite ways to learn and explore new topics.
So Edreana, when you talk with prospective students, maybe don't know as much about the case method, they're just learning about this experience here. What do you highlight for them?
I think I would definitely firstly echo everything that Lucy mentioned. In addition to that, the way I look at a case method is it's not just about one person or like all students sharing their point of view on a topic. It's about people who come from different backgrounds sharing their point of view on a topic. To give a more granular example, we had a case which was about a car manufacturer back in India. And I know I'm digressing, but we do have global cases here at Darden, which just make the whole experience so much more enriching. So going back, there was this case about a car manufacturer in India, and we had someone who, shared a point of view on what decision they would take, and it was from a financial standpoint. To have it countered by someone else in the class with an operations background, be like, I don't think that's going to help our operations, and this is my point of view about it. To then have the another student from like an HR standpoint show how it's going to impact their life and how it might not be in the best interest of company values. And in all these discussions, I'm sitting right there learning on how this business decision is so integrated across these multiple facets and functions. Because at the end, we are not functional leaders, we are going to be business leaders. And I think that's just a beautiful way of spending time in a case method here at school. And it also just teaches you to, on a softer end, it teaches you like when in a conversation should you like hold your point of view so as to be able to give space to someone else to share their perspective, so as to be able to take it in and factor it in as you're thinking about your point.
Wade, how about you? What do you highlight for prospective students as they're learning about the case method?
Well, I think both of those examples were just incredible. I think, boiling it down for me, the case method really puts you in the driver's seat as you think about a business problem that somebody is facing. And you as one person, you might come in with a certain perspective or opinion. But really what happens in the classroom is that you're co-creating an answer with 70 of your friends, right? You're getting informed positions from everybody in the classroom, and it's being facilitated by a faculty member who, instead of pointing you in the right direction, actually deepens your understanding or deepens the quality of the problem by asking questions. So the faculty member is facilitating through the Socratic method. And really what that does is open up opportunities to take a new, different angle or a new perspective towards whatever problem that you're facing. So for me, kind of just from, understanding how the decision-making process works, thinking about what criteria you might need in order to make a decision, understanding what the trade-offs are in different perspectives or from different kind of angles, and really just getting a sense of, how complex, something that might seem simple to you, how complex it might be when you wrap in, minds from different functions, different experiences, different backgrounds, and having to keep that kind of all in mind at the same time. So for me, it's really about the co-creation, and that's been a phenomenal experience for me.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about how you prepare for this kind of thing, because I think for a lot of students, they're used to, well, you have homework, you read a textbook, you come in, the faculty member tells you what you need to know, you go and learn that, take a test, etc. A little different here at Darden. So, Edreana, how do you prepare for class? How do you get ready for one of these case discussions?
Absolutely. For this, I will go back to the time that I read my first case, and I'm so grateful that I had a learning team to read it with, because all of us are in the same boat, right? We are trying to understand how do we go ahead with something like this. And we all would read the cases, and we would come with a point of view or a perspective or a decision that we want to make based on data, because everyone's reading the same content. So everyone's going to read the same content, and they are going to come up with their version of what needs to be done next, the basis of which would be your prior experience, your interpretation of what you've read, and some conversations you would have had with your peers here at school in understanding the content. And we would have these discussions in our learning team rooms wherein everyone would start listing out their point of view and where they come from and why, to eventually reaching a consensus of, okay, I think all of us agree on these points. These are what we don't agree on because we come from different backgrounds, and that's going to be very normal. But let's see when we go in class what new perspectives we'll get and how does that fit, either align with what we think or doesn't, or probably helps us solve the unresolved questions we still had. Because mind you, if there's one thing I've learned to be comfortable with is even at the end of it all, you're still going to have some things that are unresolved, but you have to learn to be okay with it as you're deciding on some crucial decisions. So that was my experience in navigating it.
Wade, how about you? How do you prepare for a case discussion?
I think it's actually changed a bit over time. So kind of similar to Edreana, like in our first year, we have our learning teams. We kind of went off on our own, did our own analysis, tried to come to some sort of conclusion about the case, and then discuss it a bit in our team, before actually going to class the next day. And I found that to be really valuable. So I could try out my ideas kind of in a smaller scenario and smaller situation before opening it up to 70 people. So having that little test round, I think was really valuable. But fortunately for me, I think through the classes in core and through the first year, I started coming up with kind of my own criteria and frameworks for how to think through decisions and how to understand what information is critical and what things I might consider during a decision. So I started kind of preparing a little bit differently in my second year, towards the end of my first year into my second year, where I'd read through the case. I would try and figure out what were the available outcomes or decisions, think through the positives and negatives, and then, try and test that against alternatives. So it definitely went from a more collaborative preparation model in the first year towards a little bit more individual. But I can say the only reason or the main reason I personally was able to do that is because of the incredible conceptual learning and studying that we had during our core classes.
And for our listeners who are just starting to learn a bit about all of these support structures here at Darden, a learning team is typically about a 6-person team that's assigned to you at the start of your first year. These folks are with you during the core. They're a touch point for you socially, also academically a support for you as you navigate the core curriculum through the first 3 quarters of the full-time MBA program. And part-time MBA and executive MBA students also have learning teams here at Darden. So Lucy, how do you get ready for a case discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I will echo what my colleagues here have already said. Certainly during the core curriculum at Darden, your learning team is just absolutely foundational. And it's really helpful because on that 6-person learning team, the administration does a great job actually trying to diversify those teams, especially in terms of background. So, while you might have someone who spent their career in marketing, you also will have someone who spent their career, pre-Darden in banking or in operations or strategy. And so they really balance that out, and it helps you not only learn the content, but also learn how to work within a team that has different perspectives there. I will echo both what Wade said and something Edreana said earlier in the conversation about how Darden, yes, teaches you concepts, but also teaches you, how to think about different scenarios. And so the farther you get into your Darden experience, I certainly, experienced what Wade referenced in terms of moving from more of a collaborative to more of an individual preparation method. That's also just by nature of moving from the core curriculum into second year electives, which don't have designated learning teams for them. But increasingly, as you get more familiar with how a case classroom runs, with honestly, the goals and the learning objectives and the context around which you're having these conversations, I find you can engage more deeply or I guess in a different manner with the preparation materials. And so for me, it always starts with taking a look at or reflecting on, what is this class even about? What am I here to learn? What is the general topic? Reading through all of the materials. Oftentimes you'll have the case itself, but then you might have a supporting, we call them tech notes, which is effectively, a short briefing on the key concept that you're covering in that class, maybe a model, how to approach, a certain analysis that you're going to be focusing on that day. So really learning the concepts, reading through the case, understanding, okay, what are we talking about? What's the situation? And then taking some time to do that reflection on, where might we go with this? If I was in this person's shoes, what would I be thinking about right now? What might I not be initially thinking about right off the bat? What are some of I like to spend some time challenging my own assumptions about my first reaction to a case. That's certainly something I learned to do at Darden, right? Especially after that core curriculum, you become a lot more accustomed to having people think about things in different ways. And so it's really great to start incorporating that thinking into your own and developing a broader and a more nuanced perspective going into the class. And then, of course, you get into class and inevitably there's something you didn't even think about before on your own. And again, that's part of the beauty of the Darden case experience.
I know this is going to be probably a difficult question to answer, but still want to ask it anyway, because I think people always appreciate stories, helps contextualize some of the things that we're discussing. Wade, you've read hundreds of cases during your time at Darden. Do you have a case that you particularly enjoyed or a discussion that stands out in your mind as you think back on the experience that you've had here?
Wow, that is definitely a great question. There have been hundreds of cases that we've read through, and I can tell you just off the top of my head, one of my favorite case discussions was from a core marketing class. We were studying a company that was doing direct-to-consumer mattresses. And the reason that I remember this case is because I was the opening cold call from my teacher. So if for those who aren't familiar, kind of some professors will start the class by asking a student in the class what they would do. And that might be saying, hey, Wade, what are you going to do in this situation and why? And so as the first question in the class, you get to start out and provide your decision, provide your reasoning, provide your supporting evidence, and then field questions and, hear from your classmates about the many reasons that you're right or wrong, depending on how that goes. And your professor might also jump in and ask some counterfactuals and things like that. So I remember this case fondly because it was the first time, I think it was maybe our second or third week of class, where I was handling that cold call. And I have to say, in the hot seat, it really did get warm under the collar for me. But I think one of the things that was a great experience throughout that class, but throughout, all of core is you really get to learn how to speak, think on your feet, articulate your thoughts, and kind of have conviction behind the things that you say. And so, it was a bit of a struggle in the beginning to get my feet under me when I was surprised by that cold call. But I have to say it was a great experience and learning experience for me, for sure.
Yeah, the opportunity to practice your presentation skills, your speaking skills, develop your presence a bit more, to do all of those things here. Lucy, do you have a favorite case that stands out from your time?
Yeah, and it's almost impossible to answer this question because every case is a little bit different. The one that really comes to mind for me with this question was in our third quarter, our last quarter of core, we had a combo class. So we were studying both ethics and decision analysis at the same time in this quarter. And our DA professor came into our ethics class to talk about a case. And this case involved both, the very quantitative analysis, the regression, the statistics that we were covering in DA, but also had this amazing ethics, the whole subject, the whole concept and the context of the case was all around ethics. And so I really loved seeing those two topics that, might at first brush seem, pretty disparate, come together in one unified conversation. Also just fun to see, two different professors that you usually don't see together, engaging and leading a class together, and then seeing how the class discussion kind of evolved from that. But, that was really foundational for me just to see that, yes, of course, business is not siloed into these 5 different classes the way that we silo things into each quarter here at Darden. And so seeing really how those two fields would interact was really cool and one of my favorite experiences.
That's awesome. Adriana, I recognize this is filed under impossible podcast questions, but nevertheless, a case that you really enjoyed?
Absolutely, no, but it's a great question because it made me reflect on so many cases that I've been through right now and relive those moments. I think one of the cases that strikes out to me particularly because we fail to realize as students at times that MBA experience may not necessarily be about learning and developing technical skills and soft skills, but it's also you getting on a journey or on a transformational journey of getting to know yourself better. And I think one of the courses that struck a chord with me and the class with a leading organizations course, which happens in, I hope I still know because we've taken so many courses over the last 2 years, but Q1 of core, we had a mining case, and it was the first time I've ever felt goosebumps in taking a business decision, as a leader, because you're tested to limits on what your values are, how do you define them, and how does that shape the decision you take? Because when you take that, it not only influences your career for the rest of your life as a leader, but it also influences the company, the organization, the employees, the society, the consumers, and so many other stakeholders involved in that decision. And the fact that your value system drives so much of it just makes you realize how important it is for you to know what your values are and how aligned it is and where you draw a line in the decisions you take. And I think that just changed how I approached every other course at Darden after that. It was not just about technical anymore. It was so much more about technicals, people, and myself. Like, where do I fall in when I take these decisions? What are my biases? What are my values in driving them? And I think that was a very crucial point for me in my MBA experience. So yeah.
We'll kind of build on that a little bit. I wonder, Lucy, was there anything that surprised about the learning experience here at Darden? Something maybe that you weren't anticipating that snuck up on you?
Wow. I think the thing that surprised me the most, and I feel like I came into this expecting to be surprised. So maybe I'm a bad person to answer this question, but honestly, just finding the takeaways that you are able to bring from a class that, at, first glance might seem, oh, in my finance class, I'm going to learn how to do a discounted cash flow, right? And then you take away all of these lessons that build on each other and, yield actually much more significant and nuanced insights. I think actually the thing that might surprise me the most is how interactive all of these classes truly are. This certainly was true in core, but even in second year electives where, the professors, it's impossible for them to coordinate all of their classes to my unique schedule of the classes I've chosen. I just constantly am finding like, oh, this discussion directly relates to this concept that I learned, last week in my other class or 2 quarters ago. And you just see the through lines, you see the connections. And those are really brought to light through, your own reading and understanding of the cases, but also through the discussion with your classmates. People will bring up different concepts. And especially at this point, in our final quarter here at Darden, you can really see the interconnectivity and the nuance of the learning. And it feels so much broader and so much deeper than, I might have expected coming in, just going through each of these individual classes.
All right, Edreana, what would you highlight here? Something that was surprising to you about the Darden learning experience?
Yeah, no, it's pretty much like Lucy, where I was like, we know that all of these are meant to integrate, but the depth and the extent of which they integrate with each other was so profound to like go back and look at it. I think that was something that was like, I didn't know where it came from and it just came in there. Another thing that as I look back was the fact that you have professors that are so deeply vested in your learning, right? My entire life, like taking the professions or the qualifications that I've taken, I was like, I have reached the point where I have seen it all in terms of professors' commitment. And I came in here and I was like, I did not expect that. I did not expect to be so dedicated. I did not expect them to like take the time even outside of class to like, recognize they have like a unique talent to like look at your face and know that, Ed, did you really understand this point? Okay, if yes, like tell me, what did you understand? The fact that they're like so vested in knowing that we want you to go taking away something from this just makes me feel much more supported in the whole experience. And I feel that was like, something I'm grateful for, and it snuck up on me.
Yeah, sometimes when people think about graduate business school, they think, well, maybe the faculty have other priorities. They're pulled in a lot of different directions. At Darden here, the classroom, it's a sacred space. It's a priority for everyone. So, Wade, something that surprised you about your learning experience here?
Yeah, well, you guys just both took my answer. So I guess I'll have to try something new. But I've I guess maybe not surprised, but really enthusiastic and grateful for the amount of learning that happened outside of the classroom for me. I think that being able to have incredible classmates, both within my section and outside of my section, be willing to spend time with me to work through a model or to talk about concepts that they were really familiar with, really just deepened my understanding and helped me prepare for a variety of different classes. Whether we're meeting for coffee and talking about their past experiences or having a class specific questions, I found that not only do you get to know students really well within the classroom, but there's so much more to learn, outside, and building those personal and quasi-professional relationships with such incredible people, I think to me was like a really validating part of the experience here at Darden. And similar to Lucy, I had great expectations coming in, and I've only had a great experience. But I think the outside of class learning was something that was less expected, and that kind of compassion and collaboration really does extend beyond the walls of the classroom. So that was something I was really surprised about.
All right, last question for you. We always ask our guests here on the podcast for a piece of advice, something they would encourage our listeners to consider as they go forth on their MBA journeys. Edreana, wonder what you would encourage our prospective student listeners to consider.
Wow. Oh my God, there's so much to tell. I think something that I will definitely highlight though is take your time to learn what is important to you. There'll be so much for you to do at Darden that you want to know how to navigate it. And what will help you is aligning your values, your morals, what is non-negotiable for you, your goals. And once you've found something that meets all of these, stick to it, harvest those relationships, harvest that opportunity. And just stay enthusiastic and dynamic. I think that's something I'd like to leave them with.
Wade, how about you? Word of advice for our listeners?
Sure. So I think for applicants, I'd say really take your time in finding the right fit for school. Talk with alumni, talk with current students, see if you can figure out a time to visit the campus and feel, a sense of what the community is really like. I think for me that, and seeing how my friends have had their experiences as well, that is a humongous driver in the quality of experience you're ultimately going to have. And then once you get to Darden, or once you hopefully get to Darden, I would suggest, try something outside of your comfort zone. Really try and, lean on your curiosity and go to take a step into something that you might not have been familiar with, and you might not have even thought about before, because all it can do is really broaden your perspective on what is interesting to you and what you are excited about. I've found plenty of opportunities to do that here, and that's been a highlight for me.
All right, Lucy, you get the last word. Word of advice.
I'll try to make it worth it. First of all, I just want to echo everything Edreana and Wade said. I think authenticity and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone are absolutely top of my list of advice. I would also say, reflecting on yourself, who you are, and how you're trying to grow and develop is really important. And then also remember that the only limiting factor at a place like Darden is what you limit, is how you limit yourself. I think it can be so easy, when you're in that case classroom and you get that cold call, when you are pushing yourself out of your comfort zone in a way that you've never been able to do so before. It is so easy to put limitations on yourself and say, no, I'm not going to try this. I'm not going to do this. This isn't what I want to do. I'm not ready. You are ready, and you can accomplish so much more than you think you might. And for me, I always say that I thought Darden would open a lot of doors for me. What I didn't know is that on the other side of the door is a springboard. And I feel like I've really been able to grow and develop and do new things that I never thought I would be able to. So I would say embrace it and live it to its fullest.
I can't think of a better way to end this podcast than that. So thank you so much, Lucy, Wade, Edreana, for being here, for sharing your experience with our listeners. I so enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks so much, Brett.
Nice.
Great to be here. Thanks, Brett.
And that was my conversation with 3 members of our full-time MBA class of 2023, Wade Clement, Lucy King, and Edreana Vaz. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, We're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, at virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.